Hello, and I hope you can hear me. This is my hello. I don't know whether you've just popped in now. This is my first ever YouTube live session. I've never done it before, and I tried it about an hour ago, and it was a complete disaster. In fact, the whole thing just fell apart for some reason. A mixture, I think, of poor Wi-Fi in that particular room and something else. And you can probably hear I've had to keep the windows open because of the heat. And I don't live very far away from Luton Airport, so you can hear the planes probably coming over. So it's not studio conditions, not voiceover conditions. Anyway, it's really a sort of chit chat test, if you like, because I don't know whether this whole thing is going to work or not. So I'm quite happy to answer any questions. If there is anybody out there, if there's anybody out there, please pop your questions over. And I'm hoping that mic is working. I've sort of had to patch it in very, very quickly, because the other room that I normally do my videos in, which is in the attic room, it's weak Wi-Fi, and I think that's why my original Skype didn't work very well. It's Skype. I'm saying Skype. It's actually, of course, YouTube Live. Ignore Skype. I don't mean that at all. But I think it was the YouTube. It was the Wi-Fi that didn't work. Anyway, it's a sort of a test, and I'm going to answer a question that I pre-prepared from someone. And then, if you've got a question and you can hear me, please let me know. Just be nice to have some civilization there on the other end. So you've caught me on the hop. Let's have a look. So I had a question from Alan, who lives in St Albans, just down the road from us here. And he says something about Mandy.com. I do need some new glasses, I know that. So what does he say? Let's have a look. Something about, right, I know what he said. I can remember from earlier. And basically he says that, look, what happens if you have no experience and you're filling in some stuff on Mandy.com? And just to let you know that Mandy.com is it's a pay-to-play site, and you get free 30 days with it, but it's you've got to fill in and go through all the hoops to actually get to the free stage. And he's got stuck, basically, or did get stuck at this bit that says experience, and he's a complete and utter beginner. So how does he put something in there, because it won't let him go on to the next stage? And what I suggested was that he just put in some real world experience. He said, shall I tell a bit of a fib? And kind of yes, but not really a fib. So I said, have you ever recorded any voicemails just saying, hello, this is Alan here, not in at the moment? He said, yeah, I've done my own on hold message. I said, well, put that down. What about telling stories? He said, yeah. I've read out loud to my children and so on in the olden days. So he's put that in as well. So it's one of the ways you can get around it. Oh, we've got Steve. Thank you, Steve. You can hear me. I assume you can hear me. Thanks, Steve. Steve Reno from Oregon in the USA. So that's great. I'm glad there's someone there and my test is actually working. Have you got a question, Steve? Because you're the only one on there. You're probably the only viewer I've got. If you've got a question, then oh, Shazad is oh yeah, right. Hi from London itself. The 5x5 audio is great. That sounds good. Not sure what that means, but that sounds like I'm on. Am I on surround sound or something, Steve? Is that what it is? That's good. Shazad is one of my students, and he's from London. And hi to you, Shazad. Nice to have you there. Well, at least people can hear me and hopefully see me. Can I just adjust my chair? Hang on. That's better. Let's get a bit of a. There's my front room, by the way, that you've got in the background there. A bit untidy at the moment, so I hope you can't see the mess. So Shazad says hi. Hi, Gary. Hi to you too. So yeah, I mean, I think that the whole thing with putting in experience is, you have got experience in voiceovers, even if you're starting out. And I know you're probably thinking to yourself, well, no, I haven't, because I haven't done anything. That's why I'm taking some coaching, or that's why I'm starting out. Where What can I put on these sites? And the simple solution is to actually take some real world stuff. Like, have you done a voicemail? Have you read out loud to your own children or nephews and nieces or grandchildren, whatever it happens to be? Well, you've done an audiobook. Essentially, I know you haven't recorded it, but it would go in the audiobook category. I think that classes as narration, and you can get away with it to some extent. But of course, it's only a temporary measure, and what you want to do is to actually put in something. Where you've actually got some work. So once you get the work, you can then delete those things and put in the actual voiceover work that you've got. Other things to think about: did you do any eulogies in church? Have you ever done one of those, sad occasion, or even a wedding or something like that, or in your synagogue or your mosque or whatever? Have you ever done a speech or done any public speaking at all? If you have, then again, that's something to think about. If you've done public speaking, particularly at work presentations, because they are essentially communicating a message, aren't they? That's what you're doing. You've got your mic, and you are talking into the microphone if you're lucky enough to have one, and you are addressing your audience. So I think in that sense, you are doing pretty much what a voice actor does, which is taking the words on the page and bringing them to life. And I always say that's what you should be doing. Shazad, actually, if I just come back to you, if you're still there, Shazad speaks, is it 7 languages or 5 languages? 5 fluently, I think, and 7 you can. Oh, 6. Sorry. Okay, you speak only 6. My goodness, you want to get yourself to language school. 6 languages: English, Bengali, the two primary ones, and then I think you've got Spanish in there, you've got French in there. And I do get a lot of people saying, "Well, I do speak some languages, 5 fluent." 1 not yet. Is that the Arabic that you're doing? You're studying Arabic? Was that the one? I think it was something like that. You must have a special brain. I just can't. I barely can get myself around my tongue around English. Oh, Chinese. That's right. You're doing some Chinese. Okay. Well, hopefully you can order something in a restaurant. Get to that stage. That's fine by me. But I do get a lot of people saying things like, "Well, look, I speak a couple of languages. And what can I use them in voiceovers?" And I think there's always an issue here, which is, do you speak it like a first language? Have you got an accent? So if you're English speaking French, to French people, will you sound like you have an accent there? Do you sound like you've got a British accent or American accent, whatever? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people would say, well, yeah, I do sound like I've got an accent, to be honest, in that language. And that's where the issue comes. Now, there are some people who are so good and their languages are so good that they don't have an accent, a very neutral accent. In fact, I did have a student a few years ago from Chile. I think she was from Santiago, who had the most wonderful, she hadn't lived over here very long, but she had the most wonderful kind of Surrey accent, and there was no sort of Chilean Spanish sound there at all. It was just completely purely British sounding and southeast sounding, kind of home counties. So she did very well. Right, I've got a message here from India. I'm very new to voiceovers, but have already worked on 3 to 4 projects. That's very good, actually. Please guide if I should make my demo by myself. Please also suggest the best way to do that. Okay, making a demo yourself. Some coaches say, no, don't do it. Go to a studio because you've got professionals there. You can make an absolutely pristine one. Obviously, you're spending a bit of money on it, but it will sound so much better than a homemade demo. However, there is what I call the paradox of the show reel. And that is, if you go to a studio and you spend whatever it costs, 150, 200, 300 pounds, whatever you're spending just making a show reel with the producer. Oh, Steve is going off to work. Okay, thanks for watching, Steve. Thank you very much. If you then make this demo in the studio, it will sound very, very good. However, your home recording gear, chances are it's not going to sound as good as the actual demo that you recorded. So for the client, if they're listening to your demo, your studio produced showreel, they're going to go, oh, that's good. Used a, I don't know, Neumann U87 microphone, £2,000 worth of mic, and a Focusrite liquid channel interface for about £1,000. You've got to have at least £3,000 worth of equipment there, and a fully sealed voiceover booth or whisper booth or whatever. You've then got to contrast that with what you actually produce for your clients, which is something I produce in my back bedroom with some old blankets and curtains, and a USB mic, a Blue Yeti or something for £120. So it's never going to match it. So RA, if I can just say that, I don't know if it's RA or RA. But what I say, RA, is that if you do go and go to a professional to have it made, always bear in mind that eventually at some point you're going to have to record from home. You're going to have to do your auditions from home, aren't you? So if you do, you're going to get a very different sound, and that, I think, is always the problem. And like I say, it's sort of a paradox in showreel recording that you can end up with this beautifully produced thing, but by the same token, you've got a different sound from home, and I think that's always an issue. You say, please also suggest the best way to do that, and I think you mean to record from home and do your showreel from home. I would say, in fact, I've got a video if you want to search through, where I'm just saying start with the planning. So if you write down or note down on your computer or something the format it should take. Now you've got a few options with showreels. One is to have a montage. So that means doing absolutely everything on there, but cramming it into 90 seconds. Don't go for more than 1.5 minutes. I think that's your absolute maximum. And I would say you can have a montage, which is a sort of shop window. So it's your greatest hits or your best bits from a variety of genres. So you might do something like a commercial, start with a commercial, maybe do promo, bit of an audio book, perhaps some character voices if you like doing character voices. Put that in there, but they've got to be short bursts, of course, because you've only got 1.5 minutes. You've only got this 90-second window in which to do the whole thing, because clients have, and listeners generally have, very short attention spans, and they will listen for 5-10 seconds at most. So you kind of got to get it. You've got to get them grab their attention. So start with your strongest piece. So if your strongest piece actually is a piece of corporate, but not the commercial, or not your character voices, not your audio book, start with that. So I would always begin with a good strong piece. Get your scripts together. Make sure you've got some decent scripts. Edge Studio have some free scripts, really good on there. You can adapt them and things like that for your own purposes. So you've got the montage reel, and really that's a throwback to the old days of cassette. So the reason we have montage reels is really historical. It's a legacy from the days when I was starting out, all you had was like a cassette tape, and that had to have everything on it because we had no other way of listening apart from reel-to-reel tape. So you had to put everything on there because, how would a client go to your corporate, which was about 20 seconds in? They'd have to fast forward, come back again, try and find it, play it, and it'd be really difficult. So you had to just cram everything into 1.5 minutes. And I mean, everything goes in there into this kind of broth of a recording. And I think montage reels they're historical, and I think we still use them to some extent, and certainly agencies use them, and a lot of people use them because of that legacy, because it comes from the days of cassette. But of course, when CDs came in, suddenly clients could skip, and they could skip tracks and listen to your corporate, but didn't want to hear your Shakespeare soliloquy or your shampoo ad. They weren't bothered about those. They just want to hear your corporate. So of course they could do that. So you can actually do you could actually do, oh, just, sorry, interrupting myself. Nick from VA, is that Virginia? Showing my, my ignorance of the American states. I think that's loving the info. Thanks very much, Nick. Thank you. Very kind of you to say that. So yeah, these montage reels are a throwback really to the days of cassette tape. And that's the only thing I would say. And agents still seem to love them, but I'm not convinced clients love them. And I did work with a client once, and I was actually doing the voiceover for him. And he said to me, what else do you do? And I said, well, I do a bit of training as well. I do some coaching. And he said, can I just have a word with you about that? And I said, oh, yeah. And he said, would you mind telling people who are putting show reels together to do very specific show reels? And he said, look, rather than giving me a montage, because if I want to hear a corporate read, online training, that's what I want to hear. He said, I don't want to hear, like I've just said, I don't want to hear the shampoo ad or the Shakespeare soliloquy or your impression of an alien from the planet Thwarg. That's you're very impressive, but I don't want to hear it. And from that point onwards, I realized that actually clients really want to have an a la carte. So they want to be able to pick up the actual demos that they're interested in. And I think that's really important. So if you're expanding your showreel collection, what I'd say, Ra, is I would do a corporate reel, I would do a commercial reel, I would do an audiobook reel, and so on. So from all these different genres, you can then kind of dip into them, or just do separate demos. So you could just do a separate demo, upload it online, or put it on old-fashioned cassette. Rahul, okay, thank you. Oh, good, right. Glad that's useful. I think, Ra, actually, if you make it yourself, and it's got the big advantage, of course, of being free or cheap. What kind of mic have you got, Ra? What is it? Have you got one yet? He's frantically typing it in. But yeah, you can make a show reel from home. I'm not one of these coaches who says don't do it, but there again, going to a studio, having the experience of being in a studio, it's a USB mic. That's fine. What sort of USB mic is it? Do you know? Let me know. Going to a studio is a fantastic experience, and Audio Technica. Okay, yeah, that's good. A fantastic model, actually, fantastic make. So just in fact, you've inspired me to say a little bit about USB mics generally. This is a USB mic. It's it's not a very popular one, actually, and I think that's a great shame, because I think it's fantastic. It's great for doing videos. It's just plug and play. It's an MXL Tempo. It's coming up at about, I think, £80, £90, something like that. It's plug and play, of course, because it's USB. But it's a great mic, and I've used it for a lot of voiceovers. And I know there'll be people watching this thinking, "Oh no, he's used a USB mic for voiceovers." But I think it's pretty darn good, actually. I think the detail is incredible. It's got you can probably see it from that side. It's got a big area, so it's got a really big diaphragm in there. Probably as big as something like the Blue Yeti, which is probably the most popular USB mic. So should you use a USB mic? You said, Ra, DAT was always going to be my next question. And I think you mean that, you're just being funny. But actually, DAT was the next step sort of after cassette. Sorry, I'm just wandering there. My mind's wandering. But DAT tape was digital audio tape, and it was like cassette. So cassette tape, but with digital quality on there, not analog. So anyway, that's beside the point. And I'm sure you haven't got a DAT recorder. It's probably worth quite a bit of money now, actually. But anyway, USB mics. I'm sort of a fan, I'm sort of a fan. And I'll tell you a little story that a few years ago, when I started recording from home, so I'd always gone to studios. I was a good old-fashioned boy, and I used to go to studios to record. And my agent said to me one day, "You need a new show reel." So I said, "Don't worry, I'll record you a new cassette. How about that?" And she said, "Cassette? We don't use those nowadays. No one can play them." And I said, "Oh, right, a new CD, compact disc." She said, "CD? We're using MP3s." And I had no idea what she was on about, so I had to go off and just find out. It was completely new to me. So, you know, this kind of amazing development. But anyway, USB mics. Why do I sort of say you should go for one? Well, I'm not saying you should go for one. I think there are some fantastic ones around. If you ever watch Bill DeWeese, actually, and you should, because I think he's a brilliant coach, and you can learn a lot about voiceovers and life generally, and marketing, certainly from him. But he recommends the Apogee, which is a very expensive USB mic, and I'm sure it's fantastic and probably is better on a Mac than anything else. But USB mics have some advantages. One is you don't need any drivers. So if you're on Windows, you don't have to download any drivers for an interface. They're plug and play. They tend to be cheaper, not all of them, but they tend to be cheaper than going the analog XLR route. But they have some disadvantages. And one of those disadvantages is that they can be noisy. So you can get a bit of hiss with them. If you're using something like Audacity, you can remove it. Lots of things like Adobe Audition, you can remove the hiss. But there is a trade-off there, which is you tend to some extent, you tend to compromise the actual voice. So that might happen if it occurs. So there are disadvantages to USB mics. But I was telling you that story, wasn't I? I was telling you that story about my agent saying, get a new, you better start recording from home and get me a new show reel and all that business. So I got myself a mic, and I got myself and I didn't know very much about microphones in those days, other than because the studio had done it all for me. And I thought, well, I better learn. And I got myself a USB mic, an Alesis USB mic, which they sadly don't make anymore. But it wasn't very much, and I bought it. And I listened to it, and I thought, this is rather good. And anyway, I got quite a bit of work with it, and I sent it off. I did some work for this company in Morecambe, which, for those of you who don't live in the UK, is a seaside town up in Lancashire. In fact, it was a studio based up there. It's near the Lake District, but on the coast. Anyway, I did this work for them, and they said they were happy with it. And the sound engineer came back to me and just said, "Oh, thanks very much for the work. Don't tell me that's a Neumann mic, isn't it?" And I thought, is he having a laugh here? What's he, Neumann mic? And I went, no, it's a £70 USB mic, or whatever the price was. It's an Alesis. And he said, he came back, obviously slightly embarrassed, and he came back and said, yeah, I can hear it now. Yes, I can tell it wasn't a Neumann. Yeah. But anyway, it fooled him. So he was thinking, a mic for 70 quid was the same as, I don't know, a TLM 103, which is about £800-900 or something. So different clients have different quality thresholds. I don't know, he must have had some wax in his ears or something, but different clients have different quality thresholds, and that's well worth remembering. So you can get away with quite a bit. And in fact, you can probably hear the motorbike going by there. So a prime example of different quality thresholds is one of my students who I've just trained a few weeks ago, and he's got a blue Snowball. So not the Yeti, but the entry-level Snowball, which is a cool, fantastic looking mic. It really is kind of cool, bit Art Deco, very old BBC style, but with a modern slant. And they're really pretty microphones. But I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan because the sound to me is a little bit on the brittle side. And I think, whereas this has got, I think, better detail and it's warmer and so on, I think the when I've heard Snowballs, they're a little bit brittle, quite crisp on one end, but it's kind of could be better. I mean, it's better than listening on a phone or something like that. But and it's cheap. You can pick them up. I'm sure they're about £40, £44, something like that. Anyway, with the blue Snowball, the student of mine said that's what he got, and I said, well, really, in an ideal world, I'd like you to get something else, maybe the Blue Yeti, which is, I think, a very good mic for a USB. And he said, I can't afford it. It's just no way I can afford it. I'm going to have to stick with this. So I said, okay, well, we have to deal with what we've got. And he then surprised me, and only, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago or something, he emailed me to say, I've just got some voiceover work, an audiobook about Norse mythology. And I said, what, with that mic? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And the author loved it. The rights holder loved it. And he's now just, in fact, earlier today, just confirmed that he's got a second audiobook. Again, he will record it on the Blue Snowball. So different clients have different quality thresholds. So although when you're talking to sound engineers or other voice actors, particularly established voice actors, they will say, no, don't go USB, don't do it, it's a waste of money. I would say, look, if you want simplicity, if you want cheapness, and an effective mic, then go for it. And you can do a lot with your sound around, so with your acoustics, basically. So this is the wrong room to record in. You can probably hear the echo now. I've got quite a high ceiling up there. And it's a very echoey room, despite the fact I've got a little bit of carpet down here. But you want to get as much in the way of soft furnishings as you can. And that will make even a cheap mic sound better. It won't make it sound fantastic, but it will make it sound better. So if you said, look, I've got loads of money, I'm going to buy myself a Neumann U87 microphone, one of the best mics you can get, really. All the broadcasters use them, certainly over here in the UK. And it will cost you, I think they're going for about £2,000 at the moment. And if you got one of those, and recorded it in the kitchen, to most people's ears, it would sound pretty ropey. But if you got yourself the Blue Yeti, and even a Snowball maybe, or one of these MXL Tempo, then and you had lots of sound deadening. So you had lots of duvets, blankets, pillows, recorded in a room that wasn't too big, maybe sort of a cupboard, but you've got to be careful because you don't want it to sound boxy. If you've got lots and lots of soft furnishings in there, and bedrooms are ideal, of course, because by default you'll have a mattress, duvet, pillows, curtains, maybe rugs, and then you can maybe add in extra soft furnishings like extra blankets and things to deaden the sound. If you'd recorded with that Blue Yeti, it would sound pretty darn good. It would sound, and to most people's ears, they go, that's the more expensive mic, except you are comparing £120 with £2,000. So at least, because you'd have to buy an interface as well. Now, the alternative to a USB mic is an XLR analog mic. And I haven't got it here because it's upstairs in my attic room, but I use a couple of XLR mics. And one of them, my Sunday best one, is an Audio Technica. We were talking about Audio Technicas earlier with Ra, I think it was. Very good make. But my Audio Technica is a condenser. And I've just seen your other thing, Ra, about, oh no, hang on. Who was it? Someone else. Someone else said they were using a dynamic mic. I've lost that one. In fact, it is Ra. Well, I wouldn't go for a dynamic. I would go for a condenser because they tend to have the big diaphragms in them. The reproduction is much, much better. So if you think of a dynamic mic as being a Shure SM58, if you want to look it up, classic mic, really well known. When you see it, you'll go, that's what it is it? If you didn't know that already, and it's got the silver tube, it's got the grill ball on top. See it on stage, on TV, singers use it all the time. People doing presentations use it all the time. And it's great for that kind of work, great for live work. You can hold it, move it around. There's no sort of background noise or anything in terms of noise from the microphone as you're moving it around. But it is not really suitable for voiceovers. And I would try, go for a condenser, either USB or XLR analog. So my kind of high-end mic that I use is an Audio Technica, but it's a 4050. There are various ones. The 2020 is good, it's cheap. That comes in a USB and a XLR version. And I think the XLR is about £70, something like that. Or you can get a 40, they've got various numbers, 4040, 4030, but mine's a 4050, which goes for around, you can probably pick it up for about £550, £600. I mean, it's kind of, although it sounds expensive, actually that's not too expensive really when it comes to XLR microphones. And it's fantastic. I think it's really, really good. But if you really want a better sound, I think go for an XLR microphone if you can, but you'll need an interface. So you can't. It's not like a USB mic where you plug it straight into your computer. It has to go through a little interface. The downside of the interfaces is that sometimes they don't work on Windows, and they do potentially work, but you need drivers. Often you need drivers for them. Not on a Mac, not on a Mac. So if you're on a Mac, you'll be fine. But if you're on Windows 10 or 7 or whatever, XP maybe, you'll need some sort of driver. And the problem is when Windows updates, what often people find is that suddenly their interface stops working. Windows 10 will update, and suddenly you can't use your interface again. And you need to find the actual driver, download it again, and off you go. So it does have that disadvantage, I think. But I suppose the cons don't really outweigh the pros, because there's a lot of good stuff to it. And I think if you've got an XLR mic, they do tend to sound better. Lower noise floor, which is kind of the hiss and stuff in the background. Better detail, better pickup, and so on. So, compare and contrast, have a look at some other videos, people trying them out, and see what you think, and even get them from Amazon. I mean, the great thing is with Amazon, you can try it and then think, don't like that, and send it back, and it hasn't cost you anything. So certainly doing that. Right, let's just have a look at some of these questions. Do you run your USB mic with an interface? No, you don't. You don't need one, you see. Yeah, Nick, it just plugs straight in. You can't see it here, but in fact, I've got this plugged into my Mac, and in it goes. It's as simple as that. Which is one of the reasons I say to people, they are very, very good. And Ra says, is a condenser mic a good idea in a completely untreated space? Well, I know what you mean, because a dynamic mic does have that advantage of, if you've got the Shure SM58 or one of its kin, you can kind of get really close to it, and it cuts out a lot of the echo. You're quite right in that sense. A busy road, yeah, I know what you mean. But the thing to remember is, even treat your space if you can. Just you don't need to spend a fortune on getting acoustic foam or anything like that. Just get a lot of soft furnishings, clothes. I mean, if you've got a wardrobe, open the wardrobe door and put the mic in front of it, and it will make a huge difference. If you can get in it, then maybe get in there. Cupboards are great, but they've got to be very, very well treated. Otherwise, like I said earlier, it will sound like you're in a cupboard. I've got one of my students, I must tell you another little story. One of my students said he found a cupboard under the stairs in his place where he lived. And he said, it said it's really good. It's got thick carpet in there. I'm just going to hang some coat hangers up with clothes and put some old curtains on there and things. And he sent me some samples. It was really good. And I said, oh, that's fantastic. Anyway, I didn't hear from him for a while. And then he contacted me again, and he said, oh, just to let you know that I had a bit of a problem with my cupboard under the stairs. And I said, well, what was that? And he said, well, I put the latch down to record an audition, and I couldn't open it. And I was in there for 3 hours, and my landlady had to break in to get me out. So be careful with your latches and things if you're putting yourself in a room. And of course, if you're claustrophobic, may not be an ideal place, but you don't need a cupboard. So, right, I mean, I think, you make a good point about if there is lots and lots of noise outside, you're on a busy main road, it is difficult to do it. However, I will say with condenser mics, they operate in a cardioid pattern or switchable pattern. Now, this is preset. So this one is preset into this heart-shaped pattern. So it'll pick up a lot that's in front of me, in front of it, but it won't pick up so much around the back and around the sides. More expensive mics tend to have switchable patterns, but you want the heart shape, cardioid one. Often the more upmarket ones have a switchable pattern into figure of 8. So you could do an interview. So if I was interviewing you and you were that side, I was this side, we don't need a second mic to do that. Or they have an omni pattern, which is kind of a circle. And that would be for things like if you were doing radio drama, or you were doing, let's say you were doing a kind of animation or video game or something, you wanted to record it, but get some atmos of people not actually being on mic, but being slightly off mic like that, just to create a bit of ambience. They're great for that. But for straight voiceovers, you're just talking into the microphone. So you don't want any noise, or you want the minimal amount of noise. So you might find that if you live on a busy main road, or you've got a lot of noise outside, that in fact the mic doesn't pick up too much. It depends on the frequencies. And sometimes you find that, a motorbike goes by and you think, oh, I've got to stop the recording. You listen back and you can't hear it. Then the next thing, a wasp comes in, and all you can hear is the buzz. And you think, how's it picking that up? I can't hear it through my headphones. So, yeah, I do get the thing about, with a condenser mic, you can hold it close and so on. But there are some big disadvantages. And one of them is that you've got to get close to the mic. So you get a very sound, and it's difficult often to put a pop shield on there. If you can, even better. But then you've got to start moving back slightly to get the pop shield to work, because there should always be a gap between the pop shield and the mic as well. Do you mind if I have a slurp of water? Sorry, it's very hot here. So yeah, I do get what you mean about using a condenser mic, but I think I really would try a condenser rather than a dynamic. I think it will be better. Funny 5 minutes. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Shazad says, hi, Gary. When someone asks, what is my studio setup, what should I respond? Is it just mic, machines, or a description of the room itself? It depends who's asking. I think if a studio is asking, you've got to fess up. You've got to say what you've actually got in there. You can't start saying, I've got a Neumann mic when you've got a Blue Yeti. You've got to say, but it depends. I mean, a lot of clients, like I said, a lot of clients have differing quality thresholds, and some clients have no idea what all this is. They don't, and they're not bothered. They just say, look, we don't understand voiceovers. We don't understand how you record and edit and all that business. We just want your voice fully edited, sounding good, and we'll stick it on to, we do the visuals. Say we do animation, or we do online training, but we don't deal with the sound particularly. We're looking for you because you're very much not just a voiceover artist or voice talent. You're very much a producer. Don't forget that. You're making sure that the sound is great at your end, so that when the client gets it, they can then put it onto their video or onto their MP3, whatever they're doing with it. So different clients. To answer, it's a bit of a long-winded answer, really, but to answer your question, I think the short answer is, look, it depends. It depends. If it's a studio or a kind of more, how can I put it, educated client, and I mean educated, I don't mean that in a sort of derogatory way, but an educated, by that I mean they're kind of aware of what voiceovers are all about, and they're dealing with audio all the time. Then you've got to say what you've genuinely got, and then they reject you, of course, for that, even though they haven't heard it. But a lot of clients coming to the market now are new media clients, and they don't know, they don't know what's going on, what the sound that you've got. You've got a load of blankets hanging up, or you're standing in a wardrobe like that. They'll just go, oh, that sounds very professional. Thank you very much. Todd Howard. Hello, Todd. He says, how would you check up with a client if they said they'd be needing you again? How long would you wait, or would you just leave it? Oh, well, that's quite, yeah. So you've had your client and they've booked you. And they'll say, we'll need you again. I used to have a kind of inverse law, an inverse rule of thumb for that. And whenever I went to clients and I did something and they go, oh, that's great. Yeah, wonderful. Great session. Thank you very much for coming along. We'll use you again. They never did. I never heard from them again. And likewise, when I do a session, I never heard anything from the client. They pay, but never heard anything. Never said anything about the sound. Never said whether they liked it. So you naturally assume, well, they probably didn't like it. Those were the ones who always tended to book me again. And I could never work that out. So you never know whether they're just being polite. I think I'm saying that, Todd, I'm not disparaging your talents or anything. So you don't know whether they're being polite or they genuinely mean it. I think you have to assume that they genuinely mean it. And what I would do is a good point about marketing, actually. And it's the shampoo theory of marketing. I don't know whether you know this, which is kind of rinse and repeat, which is you send them an email and say, thanks very much, great to work with you. And then a few weeks later, a few months later, just go, hi, hi, it's me again. Just to let you know I'm around. If you've updated your mic or something, or just, hope you're enjoying the hot weather or the cold weather, whatever it is, bit of chit chat. And then say, great to stay in contact. And you could do a mailing list. That's what some people do. You don't want to bombard people because it can be a bit spammy, but if every now and again, once a month or once every 2 or 3 months, whatever, you just go, hi, just to let you know, my rate's still the same, or whatever, or I've even got a 10% discount, or whatever it is, or just, please use me. And I think there's a reticence on the part of a lot of us. I mean, I'm very kind of shy. I know that sounds, you probably don't believe it, but I am really. And I don't like to upset people, which is not always a good thing. And I always think with my marketing, I'm quite reticent as well. So, and really don't be, because if clients don't hear about you, they can easily forget, no matter how good you are, they just forget. So, it's well worth going back to them again, and I wouldn't leave it. No, I would go back to them at some point in the future. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is they say, leave us alone, stop spamming us. But I don't think they'd do that. I mean, if they've enjoyed what you did, they know you're professional, they know you do a good sound, they're going to go, okay, well, haven't got anything at the moment. And remember, when they say no, it's kind of, well, no, not today, but it doesn't mean they can't come, or you can't go back to them later, or they might not come back to you and say, can we book you? So, it is that sort of rinse and repeat, do it once and then do it again, and maybe do it again a bit later on, but play by ear, see what happens. What's Ra saying? Really helpful, Gary. But since I've already got a dynamic mic, shall I switch to a condenser soon? In short, we'll be buying a new condenser mic. Will be worth the investment. It will be worth the investment. Trust me, it will be. But make sure you get a pop shield. You need one of those. And if you didn't know, that's like a little gauzy disc. If you haven't got I mean, they're really reasonable now, pop shields. But a few years ago, you couldn't get them. You had to buy a professional one, and they were quite pricey. So what a lot of people used to do, this is some years ago now, but they would have a coat hanger, and they put a pair of tights on there. Don't know what denier, but they put a pair of tights on there, and it would do exactly the same thing, because all it is a bit of gauze, basically, and it's stopping your P's and B's, your plosive consonants, banging on the back of the diaphragm within the microphone. So if I haven't got one today, of course. So if I did Peter, Piper, picked a pickle, pepper, you can probably hear that going, which you don't want. Got a new person here. Who's this? Jumpy Studios. Hello, Jumpy. I have a question. Personally, I am German, but I mostly work in English. My accent has greatly improved. But is that an issue that can't be fully overcome? And if it can be, how the most efficient? Well, it's a good question, and I sort of touched on it earlier in this broadcast. And I think the answer to that is, well, if you're getting work with your accent, if you're getting work in English with your German accent, obviously it's working, isn't it? Could you improve your accent? Well, yeah, but then you'd lose a bit of magic, a bit of you, wouldn't you? If you've got a German accent and people are booking you in English, but because of your German accent, if you then start losing it and take an accent coach and you start talking as if you've been in Downton Abbey or whatever, and you're from Royal Berkshire, people are going to go, well, hang on a minute, what's happened to that lovely German accent? Where is it? We're going to get someone else. So I would say no, I do some German stuff. I mean, I don't know whether you do German stuff. I've had a few students whose first language is German, and they do very well in that market. It's a big market, not as big as English, but a lot of people speak it, and it's in great demand. So I'm a great believer in sticking to what you know. What do you do? Sometimes clients do ask you to put on another voice and things like that. So it does occasionally happen. I remember it happened to me. I did sorry, boring you with all these old stories, but I did a corporate for Leyland Trucks. Now, they're big, for those of you who don't know, they're a big maker of trucks and lorries and vans and things here in the UK. And it's based in Leyland in Lancashire. And they came down to London, and we hired an audio suite in Soho. And I was doing this voiceover for them. And I'm from Nottingham, which is in the English East Midlands. And we have flat vowels. So I say bath and laugh and staff and graph and things like that. And so do these people from Leyland. And Lord Leyland, whatever his name was, came down and said, oh, let's give it a go. So I started doing my read, and I said, let's take a look at this graph. As you can see, the staff here were 4.2%. And he went, no, what are you doing? You don't sound like a voiceover artist. And I said, well, that's me. He said, no. He said, we say laugh and staff and graph. We want you to say staff and laugh and graph, because that's what a voiceover does. So he kind of broke my rule, really, which is, stick to what you know. And he had a preconceived idea. But mostly, that was the exception to the rule, I think. Mostly you're going to be picked because you sound like you do, not because you don't, if that makes sense. So you sound, if you've got a bit of a German accent and you're getting work with it, great. It's your USP, isn't it? It's what you sound like. Oh, there's the voiceover artist with a lovely German accent, speaks brilliant English. Someone said they love the old stories and anecdotes. They're the same ones. If you watch one of these again, they'll be trotted out again. Sorry about that. Right. VO samples. This is from Promod Sukwala, I think it is. VO, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. VO samples WAV or MP3? Good question. For those of you who don't know the difference, I bet lots of you are going, oh, don't tell us the difference. We know, but there will be some people joining us who perhaps don't. And it's really important to learn the difference, I think. Basically, a WAV is very, very good quality. MP3 is very good quality too, but not as good as a WAV. And WAVs are what we call lossless quality. So you can copy a WAV as many times as you like, and it won't lose any quality. But the downside is it's 10 times larger than an MP3. An MP3 is a squashed up, condensed version, compressed version of a WAV. And it sounds pretty good to most people's ears. It will sound absolutely fine. However, if you then start copying an MP3, so you make an MP3 of an MP3, it loses a generation. It's a bit like the old cassette. I was talking about cassettes earlier in this broadcast. And if you copied a cassette, you'd pick up all the imperfections and it would amplify them. And you would lose a generation. It's like a, what do they call it? Where it keeps doubling each time. The words escape me. But it will get worse and worse and worse. And it's the same with an MP3. So, but you can copy a WAV as many times as you like, and it will never lose any quality. So to answer your question, in general, as a general rule, MP3s for auditions, because they're easier to send, WAVs for the actual work. And the client will guide you. But if you're doing samples and demos, then MP3 is absolutely fine. To most people's ears, they won't know. True Vital Energy says it keeps degrading. I'm not sure whether that's my broadcast, which it probably is, or MP3s. Degrading. That's the word I was looking, was it? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Maybe my broadcast is as well. MP3s, auditions, and your own demos, but WAVs tend to be much better. Well, they are much better quality, and they tend to be used for the work, because then the client can make an MP3 out of that WAV, and it's absolutely fine. Thanks, True Vital Energy. Thank you very much for that. And I may call on your services later when I forget the word. So just a word about transmission of those MP3s and WAVs. So because a WAV is so large, once you get beyond a certain size, your email client won't send it. So your email provider will go, no, we can't send this. It's too big. So you can't send that to a client that way. So you'll have to use an FTP, file transfer protocol. And that you can use something like Dropbox if you ever use that. I'm not a big Dropbox fan, sorry, but I'm a big WeTransfer fan. And these are free. They are amazing. They're free up to a certain point. So unless you're doing loads and loads of transfers, most of it is totally free. So I would use something like WeTransfer or Dropbox if you fancy. And they're very good, and you can transfer big files like a WAV. So you don't have to use your email provider to do that. MP3s though are really easy to send unless you've got an absolutely massive one. MP3s are great to send over email, and that's why people use them. And it's why things like iTunes operate on MP3s as well, because there's such small files compared to the WAV, which, like I say, is 10 times the size, and you can copy it as many times as you like, and it doesn't degrade, as True Vital Energy told me. So any other questions? I'm quite happy to answer those. I think I've run out of my old funny stories. But anyone got any other questions? Otherwise, I think it might be time for me to go and enjoy the sunshine, and hopefully let you go and enjoy your sunshine as well. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Oh, someone's posted a question. Did you? I'm having a hard time identifying. Oh, okay. All right, we'll just go for this one. Ra says, I'm having a hard time identifying my real voice for voiceovers. If you know what I mean, I do. Is sticking how you normally speak a way to go? Well, it is, yeah. And it kind of touches on the thing I was saying about accents and so on, your normal voice. However, of course, you're not using your words. And this is the problem. Someone's presented you with some words and you think, well, I wouldn't say it like that. I wouldn't do it like that. And so you're having to not bring a voice to it, but you're bringing a performance to it, aren't you? I think when you do a voiceover, you're bringing some sort of performance to it, some delivery to it that's very specific. So it's not that you're putting on a voice particularly. You are using your real voice, as you say, but it's your real voice in a certain context. So it's a bit like, I always use the example of, if someone comes up to you and says, terrible news, I've lost my job. You don't think, right, lost my job. I've got a redundancy voice I need to put on. What is that? Redundancy. I'll find it. And you don't sort of root through in your brain to find it. It just comes naturally, doesn't it? And you're sympathetic, and you're understanding, and you're listening and consoling and so on. Likewise, if a friend comes over and says, I'm getting married, hooray. You don't think, oh, I don't know, that's a jubilation one. What voice do I put on for that? It just comes naturally. What you're doing in voiceovers, of course, is it's not as natural because they're not your words and it's a preordained situation. But basically, you are tapping into those natural tones and styles and emotions that we all have. We don't all talk on the same monotonous level. Some people say they do, but they don't. I don't believe it. Everyone has got happy and sad at one end, and then loads of shades of grey in between, lots of different hues, lots of different tones and emotions that we can bring to the table. We can bring that to our voiceovers and make those voiceovers sound better. And that's, really what I would say is you are using your normal voice, but obviously you're tapping into, a bit like an actor would in that sense, you're tapping into those genuine sounds and emotions that we all have. Even if you're doing something quite dull and boring, you can still bring a bit of magic to it, some pixie dust, as they say, and sprinkle that on. So yeah, it is your voice. Can voiceovers be compared to narrating a story? This is Jumpy Studios. In an audio book or something similar, or are there differences that have to be kept in mind compared to narrating a story in an audio? I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think all voiceovers basically are telling a story, aren't they? The sun's gone in, actually, which is why I've probably darkened. No artificial light here. So, yeah, I mean, everything in voiceovers is about telling a story. Most voiceovers have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you start with an intro. Even like a 30-second commercial will have a beginning, right? This is the product, a middle, this is what it does, and an end. We want you to buy it. I'm wrapping it up. Goodbye. And obviously that's just condensed into a 30-second piece, but everything has that beginning, middle, and end. So if you take that attitude, I think that works. That will work well. So it's a very good point, actually, Jumpy Studios. I think it's a very good point to make, that you are telling a story in voiceovers. Now, how you do it, of course, will vary enormously, depending on what you're doing. Again, I'm just referring back to my tapping into your different emotions and your styles and so on. And I think that's when you're actually owning the words. I always talk about owning the words and possessing them. I think that's the really important thing. Legend Killer says, hello, how old are you? You should never ask a voice talent how old they are. I'm 58. Now some of you are going to go, oh, you do look at it. Well, we don't look at it, but yeah, 58. So age is an interesting thing with voiceovers, because a lot of people contact me and they say, oh, does it, I think I'm too old for voiceovers. Someone contacted me and said, I'm 49. Does that mean I can't do voiceovers? And I wanted to say flippantly, I wanted to say, if only you were 48 or you were 50, you could do them. But at 49, you can't. No. Of course, age is important, but not in the way that, you're welcome, legend, but not in the way you might think. So age is important in the sense that you are your voice age. So some people sound their age, some people don't. It's all in the ear of the beholder, really. And a client might perceive you as sounding in your 30s, but you may be in your 50s or 60s, and vice versa. You know, I've had lots of people through the door when we're coaching them, and on the phone they're kind of, you know, like this and very, very deep. And then you meet them and they're sort of, you know, 19 or 20 or something, and vice versa. I had one student and she sounded like a child. And there are voiceovers for people, for grown-ups, who can sound like children. And we've only got to look at the Simpsons to see that. So don't try and lose that. You know, act your voice age, I suppose, is the kind of golden rule. What does Jumpy Studios say? Just got a few minutes left. About age importance. I know some people still sound the same way they sounded many years ago. That's very true, actually. I think the reason for that is that your larynx, your vocal folds, or vocal cords, as they're sometimes called, don't age quite the same way as the rest of our body. So whereas everything else drops off or droops or whatever, sags, your voice doesn't tend to. I mean, it will age, and certainly if you smoke or you drink or you shout a lot, it will tend to age quicker than it would normally. But a lot of people, most of us, I think, probably got the voices we had, you know, maybe when we were 20, 30 years younger. So once your voice is set, then it'll be there. But it will mature over time. It will mature. And of course, you will just appeal to slightly different markets, you know. Also, you'll probably notice the way you phrase things changes as well, and you will have a certain maturity. So age is important because clients want people of a certain age. But that's everything. That's everything from toddler right up to, you know, a 99-year-old and beyond. It's about kind of tapping into it and realizing what your voice age is and playing to that, really. Funny 5 minutes, just got a couple of minutes left. Says, to construct a demo, does it need to have all the bells and whistles, having a soundtrack, music effects and so on? I haven't really covered it specifically, but no, it doesn't. It doesn't really. I think most of us do, though, because we want it to be listenable. So you don't need it in theory. And a lot of clients say, I don't want music and effects on there. Have you got a dry version? But then it's quite nice as a listener, I think, to have a bit of music or some effects, so it sounds like a full production. And if you're putting on your show reel genuine work that you've done, of course, it will tend to have all those things on it. So there you go. Don't worry about asking my age. It's someone else. Promod Sugawara again. What eatables should you intake and avoid for voiceovers? I would be careful with your carbs. I think that can make you tired, and it can affect the voice. I think it's a personal thing, really personal thing. But before you're doing a voiceover, or maybe 24 hours beforehand, try and cut down on your caffeine intake, cola intake, things like that. Try not to have heavy meals. Keep the meals nice and light, and fresh fruit and veg. You know, the usual stuff, really. But it is a personal thing, and some people might say, actually, I need a double espresso before I can get going in the morning. Otherwise, my mouth just wouldn't work. So there you go. One final one. How do you maintain energy throughout a 15 to 20-minute recording while taking breaks? Very good question, and I think it's practice. At the end of the day, it's about kind of doing it and experimenting and making sure you're not too tired, things like that. That can have a huge effect on your voice if you're tired. So try not to be too tired. You can probably hear my voice going now. So and take regular breaks. You know, sips of water. You know, just common sense, really, and see where your limits are. Don't push yourself. Don't push yourself in the sense that, oh, I've got to test it and make sure that I can go for another half an hour, because it's not a test. The client wants the very best quality. They don't want your endurance and you to go, oh, you never guess I did that in one take and I spent 3 hours solid doing it. They couldn't care less, because they might say, well, actually it sounded rubbish. But if you can break it up and so on, but make sure you bear in mind where you are in relation to the mic. You have to be right up there with the microphone, and keep that same distance. That's usually the distance, finger and thumb. Anyway, thank you very much. We've come to an hour's worth of chit chat there. So thank you very much for all your contributions. I really do appreciate them. It was my first ever live YouTube thing. I think it worked. I might do another one a bit later on at some point. But once again, thank you very much. Look after your voice and see you next time.